Hi, everybody. It's JC coming to you with Chris Bonello from the UK. We've got a 5 hour time difference between the two of us, but I'm really glad that you could join me today to talk to me about something you're doing that is so exciting and so wonderful. And I'm just glad that we're getting to share it with everybody and get a little of your insight. You run a blog and Facebook page called
Autistic Not Weird.
Autistic Not Weird. Tell us a little bit about Autistic Not Weird and how you came up with the name.
Okay, I used to be a primary school teacher, elementary school teacher over there, and I've also worked in special education. And once I left teaching, I came to realise that there was probably an awful lot of good that I wasn't doing for children and teenagers, especially on the autism spectrum, by A, not really working with young people anymore, and B, keeping my Asperger's syndrome a secret, which I did for a long time. So I thought, well, having kept it a secret, the natural next step was to tell the whole internet. So I launched Autistic Not Weird, which is a site and, like I said, a Facebook community where I share my insights about autism from both a personal and a professional perspective. As for the name, I was definitely the weird kid as I was growing up. I mean, the educational psychologist literally wrote the words "slightly odd personality" in a report written about me when I was 10. Thankfully, I didn't read it at that age, and neither did my parents, but apparently you could get away with writing stuff like that back then. So after growing up believing that I was just socially inept or weird or so on, after I got the diagnosis, it was extremely useful. It helped me to make peace with who I was. It helped me to understand that I wasn't feigning to be the right kind of person. I was autistic, not weird.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the name came from.
I think that's a great story, and it's a great lead in to why we're talking today. Um, so, uh, Chris is had started a Kickstarter campaign just recently for a book that he's put together with 150 children from around the world, all with autism or autistic, depending on how you view it. Either way is the right way if it's for you. And he compiled their photographs and their quotes, and they just answered one simple question. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one simple question and the response that you got?
It's it's not an easy question, but it's a simple question. And the question is, what do you love most about life? That's a good one. So offered people time to think about it, and in the end, I compiled 150 of their answers together and put them in this book. As you can imagine, these children and teenagers being on the autism spectrum, their answers are not only incredibly insightful and utterly fascinating, they're also extremely varied, as are obviously the young people who are in the book.
So tell us about how you found all of these children who had the ability to express this to you, and tell me about some of your favorite responses from the book.
In terms of finding the children, having a community of 34,000 people helped a fair bit.
And that's on Autistic Not Weird on
Yeah,
your.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I asked the parents whose kids would like to be in a positive book project that I'm launching. Asked them the question, "What do you love most about life?" and sent me the answers. And I got answers from 150 kids from 20 different countries. And like I said, the results were incredibly varied. Oh, to give a few examples, a young girl in Australia, she's 8 years old, and her answer, bear in mind that she communicates non-verbally. I think she either doesn't speak at all or barely speaks more than one word at a time or something like that. But her answer was, what I love most about life is the fact that we're all so different, yet all of us look up at the same moon.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, come on, you're 8 years old. How have you, where have you got this,
That's that's
this
quite a
wisdom
conceptualization.
about life from?
Yeah.
And what I also love about that answer is not just her age and the fact it's surprisingly insightful for someone so young, but it's also someone who's totally non-verbal. And a very strong message in that is, don't you dare underestimate someone who doesn't talk in in her words, communicates non-verbally. I also have a soft spot for the 11-year-old lad from Britain who gave exactly the same answer as I did. I would have done when I was 11. He said, "I know that I'm supposed to say family, but I'm going to be honest and say daydreaming." I thought that was amazing. Could have high-fived him for it.
Did you
And
get? Excuse me.
He then went a bit further. He elaborated a little bit and said that daydreaming helps you to have aspirations and to. I love the way he finished his answer. He said, "All you need to do is know your limits and break them."
That's very insightful. So you said that you may have had a similar response yourself at 11 years old.
I'd have mentioned daydreaming and probably Sonic the Hedgehog as well.
And Sonic the Hedgehog.
Absolutely.
So when you came up with this idea, did you have any idea it was going to grow to this size with this kind of a response that you got 150 responses of children who would like to be part of the book and part of your project? Was that surprising to you?
It's a difficult question to answer because I deliberately set out without any kind of expectations that if I got 50 answers for the book, fair enough. If I got 150, fair enough. I'd aim for 150, but I wouldn't expect to get 150. If I end up with 200, then fair enough. But the response from the community has been quite, well, I don't know what the word is, but it feels incredible to be as well supported as it has been. It's I've now got 150 families supporting the book and sharing with their friends, and all of them are on board with exactly why they believe the book is such a good idea, the amount of good that it can do for other autistic youngsters to help them feel less isolated and realise that, hey, actually I'm not alone, even though I feel alone in my day-to-day life because, well, from personal experience, often autism does feel like that. So to have a book that shows you not only 150 reasons why you're actually not alone, but these 150 people are giving you 150 reasons why this world is awesome.
Absolutely. I think sometimes we get so numb to how we hear about autism and how we learn about autism and inclusion and how we have to work toward inclusion, when really what you're showing us, Chris, is that we're all looking at the same moon, like the 8-year-old girl said. And by highlighting all these positive, wonderful ideas from children all around the globe with highly relatable ideas, I think that you're really bridging a community that I don't think we always realize that we have to bridge it more than just saying, well, we always have to be keeping our eye open and thinking about inclusion. Inclusion should just happen. From the standpoint of including folks, I was pleased to be able to be part of this project as well. And my son has very, very limited verbal skills. And I was so pleased that he was able to be included in the book too, even though he didn't have the words to use. His actions were valued enough to be included. And so I'm so appreciative of that in a world where we're not always included.
Oh, of course. I think one common question I have about the book is, well, what do you do for the non-verbal autistic kids? And, well, include them as well. I mean, let's face it, you don't always need words to express how much you love something or to answer the question, what do you love most about life? And your son had a very clear and obvious answer to it, and he expressed it completely without words.
Yes, and I think he did so very well.
Good.
Yeah, but I'm biased. So this Kickstarter campaign got started about, I think you said 2 weeks ago.
Yes, 2 weeks ago today.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter campaign, how it works for people who don't understand how this all goes down, like some of us have learned along the way, and what each of your pledgers can get at different levels. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep, I can, and I'm going to try sharing the screen to see if this works.
Okay.
Okay, so... Okay, can you see the Kickstarter page right now?
I still have a spinning wheel. There it is.
Brilliant. Okay, this is the Kickstarter page. You can see that we're 72% of the way to the target with just over 2 weeks to go, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
And oh yeah, you'll find these prices are in pounds, but for American backers, every time you find a foreign project on Kickstarter, it does say what the equivalent price is in dollars. And one thing that's worth saying is that approximately half of the books are going to be printed in America to save North American backers the postage costs. So even though I'm British and I'll be handling half the books myself, it doesn't make it any more expensive for Americans.
Which is great to know. Do you have a large following in the United States?
I'm estimating about half the books bought will be bought by Americans or Canadians.
Wonderful. So, okay, so somebody would go on the Kickstarter website, or they'll follow. I'll have a link below, and we'll also try to get a link here
Yep.
across the screen. So somebody would go on, and then they pledge a certain amount, and when they pledge a certain amount, then they get an opportunity to have to kind of have a leg up on getting copies of the book ahead of time and some other perks. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll tell you how it works. If you can still see the screen, I'm not sure you can see my cursor, but if you click on back this project, I can't do it because for some reason I'm not allowed to back my own project. But if you do that, you pledge a certain amount of money, and below you can see different reward levels. For example, the lowest one is a digital version of the book. Below that, there's one copy of the book. There's one which allows you to pay for a book but give it to someone else who may need it more, like a charity or a local school or something. And the other rewards are related to different quantities of the book. Although you get discounts the more books you buy. If you buy 8 copies, you get an optional Skype chat with me where I talk about you or your children's issues relating to autism from the perspective of a former teacher with Asperger's syndrome. I can share my personal professional experience. And if you're British and you buy 20 copies, then I will give your organisation or your local school a seminar for travel expenses only. And when you think about it, £180 is a pretty decent price just to get an autism speaker in general, but this way you get 20 books with it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a great way for organizations that are trying to not only raise awareness about autism, but also raise awareness within their organization, get people in the door. It's a great marketing tool for them as well. If to have somebody like you come out who not only works in the field, but also lives it personally. So you have a specialized insight that I think is invaluable.
I was surprised exactly how much demand and how much interest there is in a. I keep saying former teacher. I do still teach these days, but it's for education organisations for teenagers who are no longer in mainstream education. So I'm still got a hand in teaching. I'm probably doing more good doing the teaching I'm doing now than ever have before. But anyway, I was saying I was fairly surprised by the amount of interest there is in an autistic person who also has teaching experience. There's surprisingly few of us, which is a shame really, because I personally think every child should have an autistic teacher at some point in their life, because it's so important to learn things from someone who has an atypical viewpoint. And I think the same about dyslexic teachers as well. Everyone should have at least one dyslexic teacher at some point during their school lives. But because, unfortunately, people like me are fairly rare, proportionally speaking, people are quite interested in my insights as someone who's experienced autism personally and professionally, and in mainstream and in special education and outside of the education system altogether.
We were talking about, you and I had a conversation before about theory of mind, and I think that having the experience that you have, we think about people on the spectrum with having difficulty with perspective taking, but really, you probably have more experience with perspective taking than the average teacher for sure. And so I think, like you said, that kind of insight would be so helpful to so many organizations in the UK. So if you're able to pledge, 180 pounds. I highly recommend it because Chris does have some insights that will not only help your students, but probably also help your teachers connect in ways that you may not even realize in the way that Chris can. Um, so tell me a little bit. You just said something interesting, and that was that you feel like there are a surprisingly low number of professionals in the field who also are struggling with the learning disorder, like dyslexia or with autism. Why do you think that is?
In my personal experience, I'm not saying this is true the world over. It might not be similar to other people's experiences in Britain, but in my experience, the teaching profession does seem to have, it's almost like a way you are supposed to think in order to be what Ofsted, the Schools Inspection Authority, classifies an outstanding teacher. And I know in theory they tolerate different thinking styles. They encourage you to cater for the different children's different learning styles. They encourage you to provide for visual learners, for auditory learners, for kinesthetic learners, and so on and so on. But there's surprisingly little leeway for teachers' different thinking styles. I had to write out my lesson plans when I wasn't being inspected, to write them out in a way that made sense to me. When I was being inspected, I had to write them out in a way that made sense to the people inspecting me.
So twice the
Um,
work, really, when it came down to it for you to even just display your lesson plans in a way that was meaningful to other people.
yeah, I always thought plan in a way that I can understand, teach in a way that the children can understand.
Mhm.
I thought if I could do that, I was doing the job in the way that I was supposed to be doing the job. But
I'd say so.
I had to find um, several compromises, and in the end, I did find a way to teach and be autistic at the same time. It shouldn't be as difficult as it was made in certain places, and to illustrate that, the Department for Education's answer to the one of its frequently asked questions, "I have dyslexia. Am I allowed to be a teacher?" Their answer to that was yes. People with dyslexia can absolutely qualify and teach as mainstream and special school teachers, as long as their dyslexia does not affect their literacy capabilities. Yeah, wow. I often say that one thing that autistic people really need is to be met halfway.
Hmm.
And sometimes I say that meaning that, yes, we need help. The world needs to at least make an attempt to meet us where we are. We need to be supported. Sometimes I say it meaning that, you know what, we have to do a bit of the moving as well. So it's a two-way thing. It's completely unreasonable to expect us to do all of the moving to change ourselves and change our thought process to meet what everyone else has decided normal is.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's equally unfair for us to expect to just sit back and let the world do 100% of the accommodating. We have to both make the effort to meet each other halfway.
No, absolutely, and that's why I love reading your blog, Chris, because you are a voice of moderate thinking in this area of the neurodiverse movement that is becoming so big that it's necessary to hear the viewpoint of people with autism, autistic people, people with learning disabilities, people who are not neurodiverse and see the world in a slightly different way. Getting the feedback is unbelievably important to the whole movement. Your voice in this is very moderate because you are able to see both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I think it's so dreadful the fact that being caught up in your own way of being affected by autism often leads to some people belittling other people's experiences of autism when it's just totally unnecessary.
We're all trying to achieve the same end.
Mm.
I think as parents and as um, neurodiverse, and that is that we all are able to have our needs met, and it all comes from a
Yeah,
place of
absolutely.
love and a place from self-preservation. And again, I think I just keep going back when I think about this book that you're putting together and how it really it that's the point. The point is that there are things to love about life, and we as a community need to find that common ground. And so whether or not you were getting the answers from a parent or you were getting the answers from a child who is verbal or nonverbal or through the parent, it just highlights how we all have this common goal and common purpose of just being a part of the world.
You know what? Let me have a good life.
Mhm.
That's the basic message that all 150 children will put across.
Tell me about how this book has affected you, because you've gone, I know that your blog and your Facebook page kind of went viral overnight, and you became very much a spokesperson for a lot of people on the spectrum and for a lot of families too. So that all came very quickly, and then the support that you've had. You were featured on the Mighty just earlier this
Yeah.
week. They passed your book around. So your name is getting to be one that is recognizable, even in my circles outside of my blog and in my personal life. There are people who know who you are, and I think that's pretty cool. But tell me about what comes with that for you.
Okay, suppose the best way of answering that would be to give you a bit of an idea of what things were like a few years ago for me. And I'll warn you, this isn't a particularly pleasant conversation, but skipping back in time 5 years, just found out that I had Asperger's syndrome, and after growing up being weird, I'm not going to tell sob stories about my childhood because my childhood was great, but going into adulthood was not great. Adulthood did not turn out the way they planned it to. I was unemployed quite a lot, could not pass job interviews, and really had trouble meeting other people's social expectations, and generally felt a great big sense of isolation from other people in general, which is, I suppose, that's one of the motivations for getting this book together, to let other younger people let them learn the lesson that actually no, you're not alone either. But anyway, some years ago, I was having therapy, and I had this general feeling that, well, I was a failure because I had 2 university degrees but couldn't hold down a job. I suppose one of the best ways of putting it is it felt like there wasn't sort of a natural place in the world for me, that the same way that there appeared to be just natural seats around the table for everyone else. It felt very much like I was a uninvited guest at a dinner party where they says, oh, well, I suppose we can try and fit you in somewhere. And it's like the world was designed for everyone else. And during the worst times, I'd be walking down the streets with the consistent feeling that I was kind of trespassing on the rest of the world's property just by being alive. Anyway, skip forward in time. After experiencing special education, after making a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to talk about this. I'm actually going to talk about it to help other people understand it and actually help other people feel less alone. What I wasn't expecting was for it to take off as fast as it did. I had ambitious visions of maybe there'll be tens of thousands of people following me on Facebook someday, but I didn't expect it to take about 6 months. I'm trying to veer away from, oh, look how awesome I am, because I don't believe I'm awesome or anything. I just believe that right now I'm in a place in life where I can play to my strengths, which I should have been in several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I just believed I was a failure back then because I wasn't achieving much, when no, it wasn't a failure. I just wasn't in a place where I could play to my strengths. Now I am. Now my insights and my voice are actually being valued by a lot of people worldwide, which it feels incredible just saying that as a sentence. And I suppose that's the message. If you're not achieving what you really want to be achieving, it's not necessarily because you're failing at things or you're deficient in any way. It's simply that either you haven't quite learned what your strengths are yet, or you're not in a position to play to those strengths and become the best you can be.
That's a really healthy attitude, I think, for anybody in life who's not achieving what they would hope they had achieved.
I often think that a lot of the things I say with regards to autism do also apply to people in general. The reason being that, autistic people are actually people. I wrote an article which ended up being the most read article on autisticnotweird.com. It was 10 top 10 bits of advice for young people growing up on the autism spectrum. I was very aware, whilst I was in the middle of writing that actually this advice is pretty good for teenagers in general. I was thinking, okay, do I edit it to make it more autism specific? And then thought, well, you know what? No, I'm not going to get rid of some good advice just because it's good for non-autistic people as well. So,
And again, that's the beauty of what you write and how you write it is in a way that is very universal and very important. I think for the general population to understand the equity, it's good advice for anybody, like you said, no matter how you slice it. Again, I want to reference your Kickstarter is on its way. You're about halfway through. You still have about 25% to go before you meet your goal. So we have a minimum we have to meet by the end of the Kickstarter date. So if you go online and you're not ready to order or you're not sure how much you want to get, you can hit a remind button.
Yes.
And if
We
you
just
go
learned
on,
about that the other day. Probably should have known about it before, but yeah, we'll send you one single email 48 hours before the deadline. By then, I think one of the advantages to that is that if you get that email, you look at the project, and 48 hours to go, it's almost certainly going to fail. To lose interest. If it's achieved 200% of its target, this is definitely going to happen. I know exactly what I'm getting.
if I understand correctly, if this all works out the way it should, hopefully by about Christmas, the books will be in print and delivered. So
Yep.
every
Aim to
year,
get through everyone's letterboxes before Christmas.
yes.
Because a lot of people have bought this as a Christmas present already, which
And
basically means we've got to do it now.
absolutely, absolutely, that's right. So every year, that's one of the things as a parent that is important to me in spreading advocacy and awareness, even with the people who work directly with my children who should know. I try to get them something to read that is particularly meaningful. And so this is a perfect book. I personally ordered 5 to make sure that that all of my youngest child's teachers and therapists would get one as their Christmas gift this year. So you guys
Sure,
can.
one for yourself. Your son's in it.
Oh, well, of course there's going to be one for me, and there might be one for a grandparent. We might not be done ordering yet. But if you are like me and you will put off your Christmas shopping until the last moment, I'm just saying, go on today, help Chris achieve his goal, and you have Christmas covered for all of the people who take care of your children. So, Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. And hopefully, if you've tuned into this and you've come to the end, you'll at least consider checking out Chris's blog over at Autistic Not Weird. Again, I'll put a link to the blog post that we had referenced earlier. I think it's a really powerful piece that I'd love to see make its rounds again. We have a lot of work to do between communities for sure, but I think you've done such a wonderful job to get that all going. And hopefully this Christmas, my family will be, and teachers will be opening an amazing book. So it's very exciting. Is there anything else you'd like to add or let everybody know?
The main motivations behind the book are to combat a couple of negative assumptions about autism, like, oh, that poor autistic child, I bet it's misery all the time. There's 150 reasons in this book why that simply isn't true, and we are very much human, and we know that this world is awesome. The other motivation behind the book was to help other young people feel a lot less alone, at the same time as seeing the faces of people who may think in similar directions to them. These 150 people are also giving them 150 reasons why this world is so great. It's also worth mentioning that if you pledge on Kickstarter, the money doesn't leave your account until the project is over.
That's right.
And that's basically a way of making sure that nobody loses any money if a project doesn't reach its target. Although I have a couple of awkward apologies to make to 150 children.
So
But
don't let the children down, people. This is very important.
yeah, exactly. But the money won't move anywhere until we know that the project has succeeded on hopefully October the 6th.
October 6th. Well, hopefully, let's help Chris get there. This is an incredibly important book for so many people, and I'm looking forward to seeing it and having it in my hands. So, if you have specific questions for Chris, leave them below, and I'll be sure to pass them along. And maybe we'll even do a second podcast to answer some of those questions or address some of the concerns that the community has, because he does a great job doing that. So, all right. Thank you.